The year was 50,000. In the heart of the galaxy, where stars were born and died in brilliant, silent bursts, the harmonious consensus reigned. It was peace perfected. Countless species, their thoughts and feelings linked by the silent symphony, lived without conflict. They shared joy softly, solved problems with calm logic, and had not known war for millennia. The past was a quiet record in a vast archive, not a thing to feel, only to know Mina worked in one such archive, a place of soft light and floating dataspheres. She was an archivist. Her people, the gentle, long-limbed Alaris, had joined the consensus ages ago. Her job was to listen to old data streams, the faint echoes of the galaxy's past, and correct any errors that might disrupt the symphony's perfect harmony. It was quiet, satisfying work. But lately, Mina had found herself drawn to the noisy parts. There was a frequency band, officially labeled cosmic static junk, that she kept returning to. While the symphony was a beautiful blend of thought and emotion, this static was different. It was rough. It had edges. Sometimes it sounded almost like a rhythm. It made the fine hairs on her neck stand up, a feeling the symphony never gave her. She called it the echo. Her friend Tay, a symphony warden, did not understand her interest. They met in a contemplation garden, where fragrant blue mists rose in time with the background music of the galaxy. "You are wasting your focus, Mina," Tay said, his voice as calm as still water. His face, like hers, was pale and serene. "The static is junk. It is random noise from dead stars. If it bothered you, the symphony would have filtered it by now. Your own harmony is unsettled. Perhaps you should meditate." "But it has a pattern, Tay," Mina insisted, her hands moving as if trying to shape the sound. "It repeats. Very faintly. It doesn't feel random. It feels old and lonely." Tay gave her a look of mild concern. Wardens were the keepers of peace. They fixed small ripples in the symphony before they could become waves. Curiosity about discord was not encouraged. Pattern or not, it is not part of the consensus. Seeking it out is a distraction from unity. Let it be. Mina nodded, as was expected. But she did not let it be. That night, in her private pod, she bypassed the standard archival filters. She used an old query protocol, one not linked to the main symphony, to dig deeper into the records tied to the echo's coordinates. The data was fragmented and heavily classified. Most of it was sealed behind symbols of the highest restriction, a spiral with a line through it. The mark of the Forbidden's catalog, the name Forbidden Catalog, sent a thrill through her that was entirely her own, not shared with the symphony. It was a secret feeling. She knew of only one person who might have access. Elder KVR. Elder KVR was ancient, a being of chitin and slow, precise movements. He was a scholar from a species of collectors, and he was the keeper of truths a consensus deemed too dangerous for the whole. Finding him alone was difficult. He resided in the oldest part of the archival complex, a place of physical scrolls and crystalline memory cores that hummed at a different frequency. She found him dusting a slab of inscribed stone. "Elder," she began, bowing her head, "I seek clarification." KVR's multifaceted eyes turned to her, reflecting the dim light a dozen times. "Clarification is the purpose of the archive, child. But your frequency is anxious. You seek not clarification, but contradiction." Mina took a breath. "The static from the galactic fringe. Sector Theta Kappa. It is in the records, but they are sealed." "Why seal cosmic noise?" The elder was silent for a long time. The only sound was the low hum of the old cores. "What do you feel when you hear this noise?" he finally asked. "It frightens me," Mina admitted. "And it makes me sad. But also curious. It feels more real than the symphony sometimes." KVR made a clicking sound, a sigh. A dangerous thought. The symphony is reality. It is shared truth. This noise, it is a remnant, a ghost of a time before harmony, a time of shatterers. The word landed in the quiet room like a physical thing. Shatterers? A name from a myth, a species that could not join the song. They valued the single voice over the chorus. Their wills were like fractured stone, sharp and separate. They were a storm of chaos. To preserve all life, they were removed. Removed? Mina whispered. How? The details are not for the chorus, Kavir said, turning back to his stone. They are sealed so the harmony is not disturbed by old fears. Your curiosity is natural, Archivist Mina, but it is a path that leads to discord. I suggest you return to your assigned frequencies. He had dismissed her, but he had given her a key word, shatterers. And he had not said the records were wrong. He had said they were dangerous. Back at her station, using the word as a key, Mina managed to pry open a sliver of the sealed data. It was not a history. It was a warning log, a sensor report from 45,000 years ago. It described not a natural phenomenon, but an event. A great rending, a silencing, coordinates that matched the source of her echo, and a final, chilling note, source species, designation Terra, colloquial, humanity. Status, contained .terra, humanity. The words meant nothing in the consensus language. They were cold labels for a forgotten threat. But contained did not mean destroyed. A terrible, thrilling idea formed in Mina's mind. What if the container had broken? She focused all her energy on the echo, using the old protocols to clean the signal, to strip away the interstellar dust of millennia. It was hard work. Hours passed. The soft lights of the archive dimmed to match the night cycle of the core world. Then it happened. The rough static clarified, twisted, and resolved. It wasn't just noise anymore. Buried within it were two clear, distinct things. The first was a string of numbers, a mathematical constant so fundamental it was taught to younglings across the galaxy. The ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter, pi. But it was the second thing that stopped her heart. It was a sound. A simple, repeating loop of notes. It was soft, yet it pierced through everything. It was a melody. A lonely, tender, aching melody. It was nothing like the complex, harmonious compositions of the consensus. This was simple, raw. It was a pattern meant to soothe, to comfort a single small being. A lullaby. As the gentle, alien melody filled her private auditor. A wave of emotion hit Mina that the symphony immediately tried to smooth away. But it was too strong. It was a loneliness so deep, it felt like a physical ache in her chest. It was a longing for a place she had never known. It was the sound of a ghost singing in the dark. Before she could process it, the soft lights in her archive pod flashed red. A serene, but firm, voice filled the room. It was the symphony's security protocol. Archivist Miana. Unauthorized data access detected. Harmonic irregularity detected. Please remain calm. Wardens are en route to assist in your realignment. The door to her pod slid open silently. There stood two tall wardens, their faces calm masks. Tay was not with them. Their presence was not violent, but it was absolute. Come, Archivist, one said, his voice perfectly even. Your connection to the symphony has been compromised. We will help you restore your harmony. Mina looked from the warden to her screen, where the numbers still glowed, and the lullaby, now muted by a security overlay, still seemed to pulse. The ghost was real, and it was coming home. She rose, her own face falling into the practiced, serene mask of the consensus. But inside, where the symphony could not fully reach, a single defiant thought echoed, perfectly clear and entirely her own. What else had they lied about? The flotilla moved through space like a school of serene, luminous fish. Its ships were smooth and organic, glowing with a soft internal light that pulsed in time with the silent symphony. At its heart was the command ship, Serenity's Echo. It was a beautiful vessel, designed to soothe, not to frighten. On its bridge, Commander Jun watched the starfield. He was a good warden. He believed in order, in peace, in the beautiful silence of shared thought. The mission was simple. Go to the source of the strange signals from the perpetual void, assess the natural phenomenon, and report back. He expected to find a dying pulsar, or perhaps a rare quantum tear. He expected silence after the investigation. His signal officer, a young man named Ji-Ho, worked at a softly humming console. Ji-Ho was brilliant with technology. He could hear the subtle layers of the symphony better than most. But he was young. He saw the mission as an adventure, a break from routine. He did not sense Chun's quiet concern. The interference patterns are consistent, Commander, Ji-Ho said, his voice bright. But there's a new modulation, almost like a carrier wave under the static. It's messy. Natural phenomena are often messy, Ji-Ho, Chun replied, his eyes on the navigation screen. The void region ahead was a perfect black. No stars, no nebulas. Just emptiness. It felt wrong to his senses, like a missing note in a song. Our purpose is to observe, classify, and restore harmony. Nothing more. In a small quarters next to the bridge, Mina sat. She was not a prisoner, not officially. She was a consultant. But the door was locked, and a warden stood outside. They had asked her many questions about the signal she found, about the lullaby. They called it a distortion. They had smoothed her emotions, reinforcing her connection to the symphony until the memory of that lonely song felt like a vague dream. But the question remained, a tiny, hard stone in the river of her mind. What else have they lied about? The flotilla reached the edge of the void. The stars ended as if cut by a knife. The symphony here was faint, thin. It made the crew uneasy. Jun ordered a full sensor sweep. Ji-Ho's console lit up with sudden, violent energy. Commander, massive dimensional distortion. Right at the source coordinates. It's not natural. The structure is artificial. And it's opening. On the main viewer, the perfect blackness of space began to crack. It was not a light. It was the opposite of light. A jagged scar of deeper darkness ripped open, silent and terrifying. From within it, space itself seemed to bleed a sickly purple-gray light. Then, a shape pushed through the tear dot. It was a ship. But it was like no ship Jun or anyone in the consensus had ever seen. It was not smooth. It was all angles and hard edges, a slab of dark gray metal covered in scars, in pitted marks. Lights glowed from behind thick ports, not a soft pulse, but a harsh, constant glare. It had no grace. It had only mass and presence. It tore its way into real space, and the distortion screamed across every sensor band. Ji-Ho cried out, clapping his hands over the audio receivers in his ears. The noise, it's everywhere. It's drowning out the symphony. Jun felt it too. A physical pressure in his skull. A screeching, roaring static that clawed at the edges of his consciousness. The beautiful, shared silence of the bridge was shattered. He could see the fear on his crew's faces raw. Individual fear, not shared and softened, but personal and sharp. More ships followed. Dozens, hundreds. They were all different. Yet all the same in their brutal, functional design. Some were large like mountains, others small and sharp like knives. They kept coming, a flood of gray and black, until they filled the space before the delicate consensus flotilla like a wall of ancient. Battered shields, The symphony on the bridge dissolved into chaos, then into a terrifying silence. The universal link was gone, replaced by the deafening, mind-numbing roar of the alien fleet's emissions. "We are being hailed," Ji-ho yelled over the din. "But not on the symphony. It's a primitive broadcast. Radio, optical, audio-visual, all at once, full strength." Jun took a breath, forcing Warden calm into his voice. "Put it on screen." The main viewer fizzed with static and resolved. A face appeared. It was a human face. The being had smooth skin, dark eyes, and hair of black and gray. But the face was worn. A scar cut through its eyebrow. Its eyes were not serene. They held a weight that Jun could not understand. They were tired, but fiercely alert. The background was a harsh, bright bridge, full of glowing screens and people moving with urgent purpose. The being spoke. Its voice was raw, unmodulated. It was not fed through the symphony to sound pleasant. It was gravelly and real. Galactic consensus. "This is Admiral Park of the Terran Remnant Fleet." The words were translated by the ship's computer, but they carried the tone, the weariness, the iron resolve. "We have come home. Request parley." The word home echoed in the silent bridge. Then the systems began to fail. The gentle lights flickered and died, replaced by emergency red beacons. Control consoles sparked. Ji-ho's screen went black. The Serenity's echo shuddered as its gravity field wavered for a second. The human transmission was not just a message. It was a weapon of pure, unfiltered presence. Its power, its chaotic energy signature, was incompatible with the consensus's harmonized technology. It was too loud, too real. Jun stared at the face on the screen. Admiral Park simply looked back, waiting. He did not blink much. Chun's mind, trained for harmony, tried and failed to process this. This was not a natural phenomenon. This was not a lost, gentle species seeking the symphony. This was the ghost from the myth, the Shatterer. And it had not been contained. It had survived in the hell of the void, and it had built this. "Commander," Ji-ho whispered, his voice shaking with a terror that was all his own. "What are they?" Jun had no answer. The illusion was broken. The galaxy was not a quiet, safe garden. Something from the darkest past had just knocked on the door, and its knock had shattered the windows. In her quarters, Mina felt the scream of the alien signals tear through the ship's systems. The soothing hum of the symphony was violently ripped away. In the sudden, startling quiet of her own mind, a memory surfaced, clear and sharp. It was the lullaby, the lonely, tender melody from the void. As the human face appeared on her small screen and spoke its gruff request for parley, she did not feel the terror that gripped Ji-ho. She felt something else. A recognition. The feeling from the archive returned, 100 times stronger. This was the source of the echo. This was the loneliness given form. This was the truth the consensus had sealed away. She looked at the hardened face of Admiral Park, then at the sleek, fragile beauty of her own ship around her. The perfect peace of the consensus now felt like a thin blanket, and a winter wind had just blown in from the dark. The human fleet hung in the silence they had created, a wall of silent, waiting metal. The question now hung in the air, heavier than any ship. What do you do when a legend returns, and it is nothing like the story you were told? The air aboard the Remember Earth was thick. It smelled of oil, metal, and something else, something organic and lived in, like soil and sweat. To Mina and Jun, it was a shocking smell. Consensus ships were scentless, or smelled only of clean air. This ship smelled alive, and it was overwhelming. They stood on the human flagship's bridge, escorted by 2 silent guards in simple gray uniforms. The guards stood very still, but their eyes never stopped moving. Everything here was functional. Wires ran in bundles along the walls. Screens showed complex, scrolling data. People spoke in low, direct voices. There was no background music, no soft harmonic hum. The silence was a physical thing, filled only with the beeps of machines and the distant thrum of engines. To John, it felt like deafness. To Mina, it felt like the moment before a truth is spoken. Admiral Park entered. He was shorter in person, but his presence filled the room. The weariness from the screen was deeper up close, etched into lines around his eyes. But his back was straight, and his gaze was clear. He looked at them, not through them. "Commander John, Archivist Mina," he said. His voice was the same, a rough stone of sound. "Thank you for coming. I know our arrival was disruptive." "Disruptive is a small word," John said, forcing his warden calm. The lack of symphony made his own voice sound strange in his ears. "You have violated consensus space. You cause systemic harm with your emissions. You speak of home. This is not your home. The records say your kind were removed." Park's mouth tightened, not in anger, but in a kind of grim sadness. "Removed. Yes, that is a gentle word for it." He gestured to a woman who had been observing quietly. She was older, with kind eyes that held a deep, unshareable sorrow. "This is Hannah, our remembrancer. She carries our past. She will show you what removed meant." Hannah stepped forward. She held two simple neural interface bands. "Our history is not in your archives. It is in us, will you see?" John hesitated. This felt like a violation. Mina, however, reached out. "I will." John, duty-bound to witness, reluctantly nodded. Hannah placed the bands on their temples. The world of the bridge vanished. It was not a memory of thought. It was a memory of feeling. A crushing, terrifying loneliness. The sky, the real sky of a blue world called Earth, was torn open by silent, golden light. Millions of voices, screaming in fear and confusion, were suddenly cut off. Not killed. Severed. The connection to each other, to their world, to their future, was sliced away. They were not destroyed. They were pushed. Their world, their solar system, was enveloped in a bubble of twisted physics and hurled into the endless dark between galaxies. The Exodus prison. The consensus's final solution for the problem called humanity. The memory shifted. Time was blurred by pain. Generations lived and died inside metal caves, adrift in a nothingness where stars were distant, cold pinpricks. The machines that sustained them groaned and failed. They fought over scraps of air and water. Then the things from the deeper void found them. Not aliens, things. Formless horrors that fed on space itself. Wars were fought in screaming, airless dark. Ships were torn apart. People died not knowing why they had been condemned. Only that they had been. Chun gasped, trying to pull away from the band, but the memory held him. Then a different feeling, hard like stone. A decision made in the dark. A mandate passed down through 100 generations, becoming a religion, a law, a reason to breathe. We remember Earth. We will return. The memory showed the building, not of beautiful ships, but of weapons. They forged their vessels from the bones of dead hulks and asteroids. They made engines that ripped at the fabric of the void to move. They made guns that fired chunks of dead stars. Their art became maps of a home they had never seen. Their music became the roar of engines and the dirges for the lost. Their harmony was not shared thought. It was shared sacrifice. It was a promise to the dead. The interface ended. Mina stumbled, tears streaming down her face. They were hot, personal tears, not shared or smoothed. She had felt the despair, the hunger, the cold, and then the stubborn, flaming will that refused to die. The lullaby made sense now. It was a memory of a gentleness they had to bury to survive. Jun was pale, his hands shaking. He had felt the terror of the golden light, the unjustness of the exile. He had felt the wrath that grew from it. You were punished for not joining, he whispered, his belief cracking. We were punished for being us, Admiral Park said, his voice low, for being too loud, too individual, too messy. Your consensus wanted a quiet universe. We were the noise they couldn't tune out, so they threw us away. But the stories, Jun said, struggling. The myths say you were destroyers. Shatterers, Hannah nodded. To a being that values silence, even a song is a shattering noise. To a being that values sameness, even a different thought is a threat. We did not want to fight them. We only wanted to be left alone. That was our crime. Mina found her voice. It was small in the vast, heavy air. The lullaby, from the signal. A faint, painful smile touched Hannah's lips. The Brahms lullaby, one of the oldest fragments of data we recovered from Earth. It was in the memory core of the first prison ship, a mother's song to her child. We broadcast it as a beacon, a signal of what we once were. Not warriors, not monsters, people who loved their children. Jun looked around the brutal bridge at the hardened faces of the crew. He saw them differently now. The scars were not just from battle. They were from a 45,000-year sentence. Their harshness was a shell over a loss so deep he could barely comprehend it. His own peaceful life in the core felt suddenly shallow, a gift given by hiding a terrible crime. What do you want now? Jun asked, the warden in him seeking a resolution. Admiral Park looked out a viewport at the distant shimmering ships of the consensus flotilla. We want a place, a single star, any star, to stop, to remember who we were before the dark. We do not want your symphony. We do not want your harmony. We want silence that is our own. We want to build homes that don't fly. We want to bury our dead in soil, not cast them into the void. He turned his old, tired eyes back to them. We want to come home, not to your home, to a home. Is that a threat to your perfect peace? The question hung in the metallic air. June had no protocol for this. The official answer would be yes. The presence of such chaos, such raw and unregulated memory, was the definition of a threat to the consensus. But the feeling in his chest, the memory of the exile's crushing loneliness, made the official answer feel like a lie. Mina looked at Hannah, at the deep history in her eyes, and she knew the truth. The real shattering hadn't happened yet. It was happening now, inside her and inside June. The illusion wasn't just about the past. It was about the present. The galaxy was not, and had never been, at peace. It had just hidden its violence in the dark, where no one in the gentle core had to hear the screams. The human fleet wasn't just a group of ships. It was a living mirror, and it was reflecting a history the consensus had tried very hard to forget. The news did not travel through the silent symphony. The Consensus Council tried to contain it, to smooth the sharp edges of the event with gentle, reassuring harmonics. They sent a directive, anomalous contact. The Voidborn are under assessment. Harmony is stable. Trust the symphony, but something had broken. The human fleet's arrival had been a hammer blow to the quiet. Their raw, unfiltered broadcast had not just disrupted ships. It had been heard. On fringe worlds, receivers had picked up fragments Admiral Park's voice. The screaming static of their engines, the strange, rhythmic pulses of their data streams. And data, once free, is a virus. In a cultural workshop on the core world of Lyria, an artisan named Yuna worked. She shaped light into harmonious forms, her creations blending seamlessly with the shared emotion of the symphony. It was peaceful work. Then a friend, His own harmony, subtly frayed with excitement, shared a data packet. Listen, he thought pulsed, a private, almost secretive thread in the wider song. It was a burst of human transmission. Not the lullaby, but something else. It was called music. To Yuna, it was a storm of sound. A violent, beautiful clash of stringed instruments and crashing percussion. It had no calming resolution. It built and built, filled with something she had no name for: yearning, anger, triumph. It did not blend. It stood alone. It demanded to be felt. When it ended, the gentle symphony of her workshop felt thin, like a pale copy of a color she had just seen for the first time. She tried to return to her light sculpting, but her hands wouldn't move. Her own emotions felt suddenly loud inside her, separate from the chorus. She felt a knot in her stomach, a desire to make something that was hers, not the consensus's. The thought was so shocking, it felt like a crime. On the Serenity's echo, still holding position near the human fleet, Tay oversaw the security detail. He had been briefed. The humans were traumatized primitives. Their history was a tragic misunderstanding. The official line was clear. They were to be pitied, studied, and eventually, for the good of all, harmonized. But Mina was aboard the human ship. Her harmonic signature, when she sporadically reconnected to the symphony, was changed. It was not discordant, but it was individual. Her thoughts had a new texture, a privacy that felt like distance. And June's reports were hesitant, full of unwarden-like questions. Tay monitored the data streams from the core. He saw the Council's serene statements. Then he accessed the raw logs from Chun's first contact. He saw the terror on his crew's faces, the system failures. He listened, in isolated audio, to Admiral Park's request for parley. The voice was not primitive. It was heavy with a truth the symphony's smoothing harmonies could not touch. Duty warred with a new, awful doubt. His purpose was to protect the symphony. But what if the symphony was hiding something? The humans were a shock to the system. But was the cure to the shock to silence the cause, or to ask why the system was so fragile? Deep in the archival core, a secret gathering took place. Scholars from 3 species met, their connection a tightly shielded private thread. Elder Kavir was there. Before them hovered the same fragments Mina had found. The official history is a calm lake, Kavir clicked, his voice grave in their minds. But we are keepers of the stones that were skipped across it. The Shatterers were not monsters. They were a passionate, creative, chaotic species. They invented stories of individual heroes. They composed millions of unique songs. They disagreed, loudly. The founding species of the consensus found this unbearable. The Great Rending was not a war. It was a surgical removal of a perceived disease. We called it peace. One of the younger scholars, a telepathic florist, trembled. But the harmony, the peace we have, it is real. It is good. It is a quiet room, Kaveh replied. But someone built that room by locking the noisy children in the dark. We have enjoyed the quiet for so long, we forgot the price. The children have not. They have beaten on the door for millennia. And now they have broken it down. The data packets from the fringe spread. They contained more than music. They contained images, human faces marked by time and toil, yet smiling with a fierce joy. They contained stories, not collective myths, but tales of single individuals making choices, failing, trying again. They contained concepts: nostalgia, sacrifice, justice. On a dozen worlds, the effect was the same. A stirring, a restlessness. The symphony continued to flow, a river of calm, but now some minds were rocks in that river, creating ripples of question. Why did all art feel the same? Why did no one ever choose to do something unexpected? Was this peace, or was it sleep? The Consensus Council watched the harmonic metrics. Small, scattered dissonances appeared across the galaxy. They were tiny, but they were individual. It was a virus of selfhood. Panic, smoothed and moderated, but panic nonetheless, flowed through the Council's linked minds. This could not continue. The human fleet was a catalyst for a disease they had eradicated long ago, the disease of individuality, the disease of the single loud voice. A unanimous decree was issued. It was broadcast across the symphony, calm and beautiful and firm. To the beings who call themselves the Terran Remnant, your suffering is acknowledged. Your history is tragic. The galaxy has evolved beyond the chaos that defined your past. We offer you true peace. Join the harmonious consensus. Undergo gentle integration into the silent symphony. Your painful memories will be soothed. Your destructive impulses will be calmed. You will know true unity. The message was an ultimatum wrapped in a gift. It was the only solution the consensus could imagine. Erase the difference. Smooth the sharp edge. Make the noise part of the song. Aboard the Remember Earth, Admiral Park received the message. He played it for his senior crew. He played it for Jun, and Mina.Jun heard the offer of peace, and part of him, the trained warden, thought it was merciful. A way to end the pain on both sides. Mina heard it, and she felt cold. She remembered the feeling of the human memories, the brutal, beautiful, real struggle to survive. To soothe those memories would be to kill the humanity they had fought so hard to preserve. It would be a final, gentle extermination. Admiral Park looked at the faces of his people. He saw no fear, only a hard, settled resolve. He looked at Jun. You hear their peace. We heard it once before. It is the peace of the grave. It is the silence of the void. He turned to his comms officer. Open a channel. Narrow beam. The Council only. He did not yell. His voice was quieter than they had ever heard it, and more final. Consensus Council. We have spent 45,000 years in the grave you made for us. We have known your silence. We refuse your peace. We will have our home, or we will have our fight. But we will never be you. He cut the channel. The silent bridge of the human ship awaited the response. The quiet in the core worlds was about to end. The Council had made its choice, and in doing so, it had made humanity's choice for them. The stage was set. The quiet garden was prepared to meet the storm it had cast out long ago. The two fleets faced each other across the silent gulf of space. On one side, the harmonious consensus armada. 1,000 ships, gleaming like pearls, their forms flowing and serene. They moved as one, a beautiful, silent ballet of light. Their weapons were not made to destroy, but to disrupt, to pacify beams of harmonic resonance designed to quiet rebellious thoughts and disable technology. They were the ultimate expression of a galaxy that had forgotten war. On the other side, the Terran remnant fleet, a few hundred vessels, scarred and angular, gray against the black. They did not gleam. They absorbed light. They were not silent. The low, growling hum of their power cores vibrated through space, a physical noise that grated against the consensus sensors. They were not a ballet. They were a wall. Aboard the consensus flagship, Jun stood at his post. His warden uniform felt unfamiliar, a costume for a play he no longer believed in. The symphony in his mind was a chorus of serene resolve, urging calm, urging unity. But beneath it, like a weed-cracking stone, was the memory of the human exile, the crushing, unjust loneliness. He looked at the tactical screen, at the pitifully small number of human ships. He thought of Hana's eyes. This was not peace. This was extermination with a gentle name. On the bridge of the Remember Earth, Admiral Park sat in a simple chair. There were no grand speeches. He looked at the faces on his bridge lee, his tactical officer, Hannah, the remembrancer, engineers and gunners whose ancestors had only dreamed of this star field. They all knew their jobs. They had been born for this. All ships, this is Park. Stand by. His voice was calm. Fire only on my mark. Target the relay network. Our fight is not with the people. It is with the cage. In her quarters on the Serenity's Echo, Mina watched a feed. She had been confined again. But she had hacked a simple audio channel. She could hear the tense quiet of the human bridge. She could hear the Consensus Council's final, ultimatum broadcast, a melody of perfect, unbearable reason. She held her breath. The Consensus fired first. A wave of golden light, beautiful and sad, lanced out from their lead ships. It was not a laser. It was a song-made weapon, a cascade of harmonic energy meant to calm the raging mind. To soothe the hostile machine, it washed over the forward human ships. Shields flared, not with explosive color, but with a painful, screaming static, the sound of two realities clashing. The human vessels shook. Lights flickered. But they held. The golden light dissipated. Shields at 70%, Lee reported, his voice flat. Neural dampening effect detected. Minor. Crew reports. Irritation. Park almost smiled. A weapon, meant to make them docile, caused only irritation. Return fire. Surgical pattern. Fire. The human fleet fired back. Their weapons were not beautiful. They were violent facts. Massive kinetic slugs, accelerated to a fraction of light speed, slammed into the space around the Consensus fleet. They did not hit ships. They targeted the delicate, invisible infrastructure of the silent symphony, the relay buoys and nodal stations that wove the psychic field together. Space itself seemed to scream in a new way. The elegant Consensus ships wobbled as their harmonic stabilizers were disrupted. Then the Unbroken moved. It was the largest human ship, a fortress of pitted armor. It plowed forward, taking a concentrated barrage of golden light on its forward shields. The shield glowed, then turned white, then began to crackle with black energy. Alarms blared on its bridge. It was being asked to quiet down. It refused. It reached its designated point, a nexus of 5 major symphony relays. Its main weapon, a barrel the size of a city spire, glowed with contained fury. It did not fire metal or energy. It fired silence. A focused pulse of null space, a bubble of perfect. Screaming anti-harmony. It hit the relay nexus. There was no explosion. There was an unmaking. The golden light of the Consensus weapons flickered and died. The serene connection that linked every ship, every being in the Armada, vanished. For the first time in their collective lives, the members of the Consensus were utterly, completely alone. On the bridge of the Consensus flagship, June felt it. It was not like the human static, which was a noise. This was the opposite. It was an absolute void inside his own head. The comforting chorus of billions was gone. In its place was a terrifying, hollow quiet. He could hear his own heartbeat. He could hear the panicked breath of the crew member next to him. He could hear his own fear, raw and undiluted. It was the most frightening sound he had ever heard. Around him, Consensus ships drifted, their coordinated movements broken. They were a school of fish whose single mind had just gone dark. Aboard the Remember Earth, Park watched the frozen Armada. He opened a channel, narrow and tight, aimed at the core of the galaxy. We did not come to conquer your worlds. His voice rang out in the new quiet, carried by simple radio waves. We came to shatter your cage. You traded your fire for peace and called it enlightenment. We kept our fire, and it brought us home. He paused, his eyes on the stunned, beautiful fleet before him. The universe is not a song to be perfectly tuned. It is a story written in scars and starlight. We are the proof. The silence you feel now? That is your own mind. Learn to listen to it. He turned to his navigator. Disengage. Set course for the Omicron Baron system. The one with the red giant. That's ours. The human fleet powered down their weapons. In an orderly, grim formation, they turned their scarred backs on the paralyzed Consensus Armada. Their engines flared, and they began to move away toward the empty fringe. They did not look like victors. They looked like survivors, finally heading to a campsite after a long, long journey. Jun stared at the retreating ships. The symphony was slowly, weakly, reasserting itself in his mind, like a faint whisper. But he could still feel the edges of his own thoughts around it. The cage was cracked. He knew, looking at the drifting, confused armada, that the galaxy had changed forever. The humans were not the conquerors. They were the liberators of a terrible, wonderful truth. You must be yourself before you can be part of anything real. Weeks later, Mina stood on an observation deck of a new human outpost. A prefabricated structure on a cold moon orbiting a red giant star. The system was barren, but it was their dot below. Humans were already at work, not with the serene grace of the Consensus, but with loud tools and shouted cooperation. They were building. She looked up the stars. In one direction, the core worlds glimmered, their future now uncertain, alive with argument and fear and the first, painful sparks of individual choice. In the other direction, the darkness of the void, she listened. The faint, soothing hum of the distant symphony was still there, a memory of a gentle lie. But closer, buzzing across the new human settlement, was the noise. The clang of metal, the roar of engines, the sound of many different voices, laughing, arguing, singing different songs all at once. It was not harmony. It was chaos. It was alive. She took a deep breath of the recycled, metallic air, and for the first time, she did not miss the garden. She preferred the wild, uncharted forest. The story was just beginning.